Hello and welcome. I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and this is World Today. It's 6 p.m. in New Delhi, 7:30 in the morning in New York City and 8:30 in the evening in Hong Kong, where China has reduced democratic representation by introducing a mechanism to vet politicians' loyalty to Beijing. Now, China's legislature has approved what is known as the Patriots Governing Hong Kong resolution in its latest bid to overhaul the city-state's electoral system. Now, think about it. The move allows a pro-Beijing panel to vet and select candidates. The US says it erodes Hong Kong's autonomy. We get you the latest from our correspondent on the ground. Also on the show, the leaders of India, Australia, Japan and the US to meet in less than 1 hour from now for the first ever Quad Leaders Summit. We'll talk at some length about it with our guest who will be joining us momentarily. Plus, a UN official says at least 70 people are feared dead in the Myanmar protests. All that and much more coming up over the next 1 hour. But first, as always, the headlines. Marking a year of nationwide lockdown under COVID-19, US President Joe Biden signs into law a $1.9 trillion relief package. House of Representatives gave final approval on 10th March to one of the largest economic stimulus measures in US history. Biden directs US states to make all adults eligible for the coronavirus vaccine by May 1st and urges people to remain vigilant against the virus. The US condemns Chinese move to change Hong Kong's electoral system and forecasts difficult talks with Beijing's top diplomats next week. China's legislature on Thursday passed a resolution that changes Hong Kong's electoral system. First ever summit of the leaders of the quadrilateral framework takes place virtually. Prime Minister Narendra Modi participates along with Australia's Scott Morrison, Japan's Suga Yoshihide and US President Joe Biden. And world battles COVID-19. Over 119 million people affected globally. The number of people recovering stands at over 94 million. The virus has claimed over 2.6 million lives worldwide. The US continues to remain the worst affected. All right, let's get started with the big news first. Now, China's legislature on Thursday passed a resolution that changes Hong Kong's electoral system. It's the latest move by China to tighten its grip over Hong Kong. Last year, it passed a new security law as well. Now, the US has slammed the move.
These reforms are being condemned by what's left of the active pro-democracy movement in Hong Kong as the most far-reaching effort to date from Beijing to exert total political influence over the city. The reforms allow the executive committee that elects Hong Kong's chief executive to now have the power to directly elect many of the lawmakers who sit in Hong Kong's legislative chamber and to have the power of veto over any prospective lawmaker that it does not directly elect. The pro-democracy camp say this completely eliminates any form of meaningful political opposition in the city and will also dissuade many prospective lawmakers from even wanting to enter politics in the first place if they fear they first have to get the approval from Beijing to be seen as patriotic in order to represent the public's views. On the other hand, the government is welcoming these views, these reforms here, particularly Chief Executive Carrie Lam. She says that this is exactly what Hong Kong needs after 12 months of coronavirus disruptions that came straight after many more months of severe social unrest and many millions of people taking to the streets in anti-government protests. She says these kinds of reforms will eliminate the type of political interference from overseas and the types of unruly political behaviour that's taken place in the legislative chamber, all of which has disrupted the government's ability to try and push through much needed policies, she says, that will basically help Hong Kong to develop as a city. Some in the business community support that view because they see the need for this kind of stability coming from Beijing in order to simply help Hong Kong regain its footing as one of the most influential and important Asian investment hubs in this region. And they see this as a necessary step simply to recover Hong Kong's international reputation as a reliable place to do business. So these reforms dividing society just as many of the big political decisions have done here in recent months between those who want more stability and economic prosperity in the city and those who are still desperately hoping for more autonomy and more democracy. Richard Kimber in Hong Kong.
Now, the US on Thursday condemned Chinese moves to change Hong Kong's electoral system and forecast difficult talks with Beijing's top diplomats next week.
Well, I would expect, obviously, this meeting next week. We felt it was important to have it on U.S. soil. We certainly anticipate that National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan and Secretary of State Tony Blinken will be discussing both the challenges we've had and not holding back on issues and concerns we have with the behavior of Chinese leadership, whether it's on Taiwan or recent efforts to push back democracy in Hong Kong, or on concerns we have about the economic relationship. So they will certainly raise those issues and the lack of transparency as it relates to COVID, human rights abuses as well. But they'll also talk about areas of opportunity and ways we can work together. We certainly they will not be holding back in the conversation, but they wanted to, it's an important moment next week to engage directly and in person, and I know they're looking forward to it. We'll have a robust readout, I'm sure, when that meeting concludes.
All right, joining us on World Today is Ambassador Vishnu Prakash. He's a former Indian envoy to South Korea and Canada. Ambassador Prakash, welcome to DD India. Now, last year, we saw China pass a new security law in Hong Kong, and now China has gone ahead and changed the city-state's electoral laws. Now, what is one supposed to make of the latest Chinese move?
Greetings, Mr. Ramachandran. Lovely being on the show with you.
Welcome,
it is a very simple, straightforward move, as the spokesperson has said, minimally invasive surgery. So democracy or rule of law is government by the people, of the people, for the people. And now Hong Kong is going to have a government by CPC, for CPC, of CPC. So it is indeed a minimally invasive surgery, where the brain in a functionary has been taken out, and the government Beijing will henceforth vet the candidates, decide who is patriotic, and only quote-unquote patriotic candidates will be allowed to contest. One doesn't have to say anything more. I think this is the end of one country, two systems, and the takeover by China, which was supposed to happen after 50 years, has happened after 24 years.
Ambassador Prakash, for the benefit of viewers who are not familiar with the intricacies of the issues at hand, you spoke about the 1997 handover of Hong Kong to China. In that context, the state of autonomy would likely end in 2047. So when we talk about one country, two systems, would the latest move further erode Hong Kong's autonomy?
Well, I don't think it will further erode. I think it has been eroded. It will and they have decided to implement that. If the candidates are going to be handpicked, it will be a rubber stamp executive. It will be a rubber stamp legislature, like it is in the mainland China. Because if you do not even allow people who want to contest, and you only allow the selected people, vetted people to contest in elections, then it is basically just going through the motions. So, what is very significant for India and for the international community is to understand how China fulfills its pledges, what is the value of agreements for China, And the simple answer is, so long as an agreement or a treaty or a convention or a law, international law, is in keeping with their philosophy, their needs, they'll implement it, otherwise they'll discard it.
Indeed, and looking at it from a perspective from New Delhi, Ambassador Prakash, what's at stake here for India when we look at China's engagements with places such as Hong Kong or Taiwan, for that matter?
Well, Hong Kong has been an important economic center, is still an important center. It's a trading center. We have people of Indian origin there. We have a significant amount of trade and financial dealings with Hong Kong.
Right.
I'll come to Taiwan momentarily.
Sure.
And this was happening under the facade of having a separate entity, having some amount of it, that it was believed that Hong Kong is a market economy, and so on and so forth. So basically everything has been eroded, short of saying that we have hereby absorbed Hong Kong and it is an integral part of PRC. There is not much left, because the chief executive is going to be who has always been appointed, or in the recent years has been appointed by Beijing, and now the candidates of the legislature and the executives will all be vetted by Beijing. So I guess you'll have the nominees of Beijing in Hong Kong, and the independence, the democracy, the flexibility, autonomy of Hong Kong has been permanently eroded.
Indeed. If I can quote what Beijing has said in the last several hours, Ambassador Prakash, an official says, he describes the latest Chinese move as, quote, a combination of punches to effectively manage the ongoing chaos, unquote. At the same time, heard from both the US and its European allies. The US in particular says this is a direct attack on autonomy promised to people of Hong Kong under the Sino-British declaration. Looking at it from a Western perspective, Ambassador Prakash, how do you think the Western powers, namely the US and its allies across the Atlantic, are likely to see the situation evolve in Hong Kong?
Well, they have been presented with a fait accompli, and we have seen how in the past also China has gotten away with practically anything that they have done, whether it was in South China Sea, whether it was in Hong Kong, whether it is in respect of other activities. Hitherto, the Western countries have wagged the finger, hummed and hawed, and then the economic interests have prevailed. Even after all the difficulties presented due to COVID-19, the talk of decoupling, corporate America and corporate Europe continues to be engaging with the mainland China. Not only that, Europe has signed an investment treaty.
Right.
So I'm afraid not much will change, except that institutions like Quad, if they come of age, if they are able to get their act together, and as of now there are good indications that they would, perhaps they will pose some kind of a check on the ambitions of China.
Indeed. Now, looking at the developments in Hong Kong or Taiwan for that matter, and also given the fact that many countries in the region and beyond are concerned about Beijing's expansionist policies, how do you think the developments in Hong Kong or Taiwan impact the one country, one China policy of some countries around the world? Will it prompt or provoke countries in the region and beyond to revisit their respective one China policies?
China has changed the lingua franca of diplomacy. It is back to the law of power, the rule of power. And it's the rule of not just economic power, but military power, the muscle power. And China has shown a complete disregard to the prevailing norms, and they are wanting to supplant it by the framework of rules, regulations, or lack of it as they deem fit. Now, given the fact that they are so intrinsically involved and associated with the their intrinsic, very intricate involvement with the international economy, with trading arrangements that they have, with political arrangements, and their muscle power. Countries are very diffident at choosing.
Right.
They don't want to choose or exercise a choice. Many countries in the neighborhood, I'll not name them, are hoping that look, it is not their turn. You know, it will not happen to them. And you countries are in denial and looking at the immediate. But I think the writing on the wall is there for anybody who wants to see that China is an expansionist power, that they have extraterritorial ambitions, and unless checked, they will stop at nothing to restore, as President Xi Jinping says, the glory of China.
Ambassador Prakash, now we're discussing about Hong Kong, and I don't mean to digress from the topic at hand, but I have to ask you this, because what do you make of the Washington's move to meet Chinese diplomats in Alaska over the weekend? This policy of engagement or collaboration and competition at the same time between Washington and Beijing?
Thank you for raising that question, and that is something that all of us need to ponder and look at very carefully. We have to appreciate the fact or take note of the fact that the US is a preeminent power. It's a great power. The US has multiple interests, and US will do what is in its national interest. President Biden has already said that if it is in the interest of the US, in American interest, they will take whatever steps have to be taken. I'm paraphrasing him, to engage with China. Now, obviously, all steps or engagement are in national interest, but it's also noteworthy that the Biden administration has at no stage called China an adversary. They have always said that it is one of the biggest competitor or variants thereof, and they are certainly doing a balancing act. They are leveraging. They are sending out strong signals to China. At the same time, they have also opened up a window to see whether they can work with China. This is how big powers function, and we need not be surprised. But I would be will be very cautious about what emerges. One of the possibility, I'm not saying it is likely, but one of the things that cannot be ruled out is some kind of a grand bargain, because China is quite capable of making a tactical adjustment, seeing that countries are quite concerned at Chinese activities, and China has always wanted to have a G2 framework because it sees itself as an equal of to the US. Suppose at a tactical level they were to make an offer which would appear to be a win, as they like to say, a win-win proposition. I don't know whether the US will bite or will take a long-term view. It remains to be seen.
Indeed. Ambassador Prakash, thank you for now, but I'll come back to you momentarily to discuss further about the much anticipated first ever maiden Quad Leader Summit. So do stay on. Right, moving on for now, take a look at the COVID-19 updates from around the world. Now, over 119 million people have contracted COVID-19 globally. The number of people recovering from the disease stands at over 94 million. The coronavirus has claimed over 2.6 million lives worldwide. Now, the US continues to remain the worst affected. Nearly 30 million cases of COVID-19 have been reported in the US, and the US death toll has crossed 543,000. And staying in the US, President Joe Biden has signed his $1.9 trillion stimulus bill into law. It extends weekly jobless benefit payments until September. More in the next report.
Marking a year of nationwide lockdown under COVID-19, US President Joe Biden signed into law $1.9 trillion relief package on March 11. He believes this law will help the nation to defeat the virus and get the economy back on track.
It's clear that an overwhelming percentage of the American people, Democrats, independents, our Republican friends, have made it clear the people out there made it clear they strongly support the American Rescue Plan. Yesterday, with the final passage of the plan in the House of Representatives, their voices were heard and reflected in everything we have in this bill. And I believe this is, and most people I think do as well, this historic legislation is about rebuilding the backbone of this country and giving people in this nation, working people, middle-class folks, people who built the country, a fighting chance. That's what the essence of it is. And I'm going to have a lot more to say about that tonight and the next couple of days and be able to take your questions. But in the meantime, what I'm going to do is sign this bill and make the presentation tonight. And then there's going to be plenty of opportunities. We're going to be on the road not only talking about what I'm talking about tonight is the impact on the virus and how we're going to end this pandemic. And we're going to talk at all the elements of the bill beginning on Friday, Saturday, and through the week. So, thank you for being here.
It was a major victory in office for US President Joe Biden. The relief package cleared its final hurdle in Congress. The House of Representatives gave final approval on March 10 to one of the largest economic stimulus measures in US history, a sweeping $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief bill. The relief bill includes one-off direct payments worth $1,400 to be sent off to most Americans. It extended weekly jobless benefit payments of $300 until September. It also allocates $350 billion to state and local governments, some $130 billion to school reopening, $49 billion for expanded COVID-19 testing and research, as well as $14 billion for vaccine distribution. A proposal to raise the national minimum wage from $7.25 to $15 per hour became a sticking point in the Senate and did not make it to the final version of the bill. Approval in Democratic-controlled chamber came without Republican support after weeks of partisan debate and wrangling in Congress. Democrats described the legislation as a critical response to a pandemic that has killed many and has thrown millions out of work.
This bill is consistent with the measures we passed last year to confront the challenges to our public health and economic well-being, achieves a number of critical goals. It puts vaccine into Americans' arms. It will put money in Americans' pockets. It will put children back in classrooms. It will put millions of Americans back to work and reopen businesses safely. And it will put at ease the front line and essential workers who are in the public sector, like teachers, the first responders, by ensuring that state, local, tribal, and territorial governments can keep them employed.
President Joe Biden also said on March 11 he would direct U.S. states to make all adults eligible for coronavirus vaccine by May 1 and urge Americans to remain vigilant against the virus.
I said I intended to get 100 million shots in people's arms in my first 100 days in office. Tonight, I can say we're not only going to meet that goal, we're going to beat that goal, because we're actually on track to reach this goal of 100 million shots in arms on my 60th day in office. No other country in the world has done this. Now, because of all the work we've done, we'll have enough vaccine supply for all adults in America by the end of May. That's months ahead of schedule.
India, Germany, France, Italy have already announced relief packages. The Australian government unveiled $928 million tourism support package on March 11, aimed at boosting local travel while the international routes remain closed because of the coronavirus pandemic. Canada's federal government is also all set to kickstart the country's post-pandemic economy. With Bureau Inputs, World Today Desk, DD India.
Meanwhile, Novavax COVID-19 vaccine has been found to be 96% effective in preventing cases caused by the original version of the coronavirus in a late-stage trial conducted in the United Kingdom. It gets one step closer to regulatory approval. Now, there were no cases of severe illness or deaths among those who got the vaccine. The vaccine has also been found to be about 86% effective in protecting against the virus variant in the UK. It's about 90% effective overall, combining data from people infected with both versions of the coronavirus. Now, the Novavax vaccine was found to be 55% effective in South Africa. The company expects to use the data to submit for regulatory authorization in various countries. Meanwhile, U.S. Health Minister Matt Hancock hailed a huge boost in terms of the vaccine's efficacy. He tweeted, I quote, "Really encouraging results from Novavax tonight on its efficacy against variants. We've ordered 60 million doses, and if approved by the medicines regulator, it will be another boost to the UK's vaccination rollout as we work to overcome this virus," unquote. Moving on, American medical device company Johnson & Johnson's chief scientist has said the company expects to produce up to 3 billion doses of its COVID-19 vaccine next year. This after the European Union approved the company's one-shot immunization on Thursday. The company is bringing on 3 manufacturing plants to produce the key drug substance. It will have 7 plants globally that will handle final production and bottling into vials known as fill and finish. Now, Thursday's approval included authorization in Europe of Maryland-based Emergent Biosolutions, which is making active drug substance for the vaccine. Meanwhile, Indian drug maker Biological E Limited will handle both drug substance and fill and finish for Johnson & Johnson's vaccine. The company's managing director told Reuters last month that Biological E was looking to contract manufacture of about 600 million doses of Johnson & Johnson's COVID-19 vaccine per year. Now, Biological E is in the process of installing and validating equipment in the plant, which Stoffel said he expects to be ready in the second half of this year. To South America now, where Brazil recorded the world's highest COVID-19 death toll over the past week. It triggered tighter restrictions in the country's most populous state of Sao Paulo. Intensive care wards for treating COVID-19 patients reached critical occupancy levels over 90% in 15 of 27 state capitals. On Thursday, Sao Paulo's governor announced a new stage of restrictions to enforce social distancing. The official argued that it's now the only weapon against the spread of the virus. They include a curfew from 8 p.m. to 5 a.m., the suspension of religious services and sports events, including soccer matches, and people not being allowed to use beaches or parks. With more than 270,000 deaths, Brazil's pandemic death toll over the past year trails only the U.S. But over the past week, Brazil has averaged more than 1,600 deaths per day, ahead of some 1,400 in the U.S., where the outbreak has ebbed. Moving on, the lower chamber of U.S. legislature has approved a pair of gun control bills backed by a maximum 8 Democrats. The first measure, which passed the Democratic-led chamber 227 to 203, would close a long-standing loophole in gun laws by expanding background checks to those purchasing weapons over the internet, at gun shows and through certain private transactions. The second bill, passed 219 to 210, would give authorities 10 business days for federal background checks to be completed before a gun sale can be licensed. Currently, such sales can proceed if the government cannot complete complicated background checks of prospective buyers within 3 days. Now, U.S. President Joe Biden is a supporter of expanded gun control measures. The legislation may face a tougher battle in the upper chamber of U.S. legislature, where Biden's fellow Democrats hold an even slimmer majority than in the lower chamber. The bills follow a series of deadly U.S. mass shootings over the past decade.
Here we are with this legislation, and we're very optimistic that with 90% support in the public and with a public awareness, again, the drumbeat created by the people out there, the survivors of gun violence. We told them we're not resting until we get this job done. And today we're taking a giant step in that direction for the children.
And shifting focus to Southeast Asia now, United Nations officials says at least 70 people are dead in the Myanmar protests. All that and more in the next report.
Protests continue unabated in Myanmar Activists held more rallies against the junta on Friday as South Korea said it would suspend defense exchanges and reconsider development aid to the Southeast Asian nation because of the military's harsh crackdown on the protests. It said Seoul would suspend defense exchanges, ban arms exports, limit exports and other strategic items, reconsider development aid and grant humanitarian exemptions, allowing Myanmar nationals to stay in Korea until the situation improved. Protesters were seen fleeing after shots were fired. Smoke bombs were also released by the police. Protests continue in Yangon, Myanmar's biggest city, and several other towns on Friday. The country has been in crisis since the army ousted Suu Kyi's elected government on February 1st coup, detained her and officials of her National League for Democracy party, and set up a ruling junta of generals. Suu Kyi lawyers have denied junta spokesman Brigadier General Jo Min-tun's bribery allegation. It said on Thursday Suu Kyi had accepted illegal payments worth $600,000 as well as gold while in government, according to a complaint by Phao Minh Thien, a former chief minister of Yangon. Adding corruption charges to the accusations facing Suu Kyi, these allegations could bring her a harsher penalty. The Nobel Peace Prize laureate now faces 4 comparatively minor charges, such as illegally importing 6 walkie-talkie radios and flouting coronavirus curbs. A group of lawyers for journalists who were arrested for reporting on Myanmar's junta crackdown on anti-coup protesters a couple of weeks ago were barred from entering a Yangon court hearing on Friday. United Nations human rights investigator on Myanmar said the military junta had murdered at least 70 people since February 1st coup, perpetrating killing, torture, persecution that may constitute crimes against humanity.
In the written report that I filed last week, I documented a total of 23 murders. As of this moment, credible reports indicate that Myanmar security forces have murdered at least 70 people. Madam President, those murdered were fathers, sons, mothers, daughters, husbands, and wives. They were educators, they were engineers, they were students, they were many ages, but more than half of those murdered were members of Generation Z, or young people under the age of 25.
Amnesty International accused the army of bringing lethal force against protesters and said many killings it had documented amounted to extrajudicial executions. Suu Kyi has remained in detention for 5 weeks and faces a number of accusations from the military junta. When will the crisis end remains to be seen. World Today Desk, DD India.
All right, take a look at what else is making news in our News at Glance segment.
British opposition Labour Party lawmaker Jess Phillips paid tribute to women who have died at the hands of men over the last 12 months. Phillips, who is her party's policy chief on domestic violence, read out in the chamber of the House of Commons the names of all 118 women murdered by men in the United Kingdom last year. It took her more than 4 minutes to read the list. Phillips reads out the list every year, but it was highlighted this year by the disappearance of a 33-year-old London woman and the arrest of a police officer on suspicion of her kidnapping and murder. Papua New Guineans gathered in their thousands, many carrying flags and signs to pay respect to their Grand Chief at a state funeral on Friday for Micah Somare, the former Prime Minister who led the Pacific Archipelago to independence. Aged 84, Somare died on the 26th of February, just weeks after he was diagnosed with late-stage pancreatic cancer. He served as leader 4 times and was the country's first Prime Minister after Papua New Guinea gained independence from Australia in 1975. A Peruvian prosecutor has charged presidential hopeful Keiko Fujimori with money laundering following a 2-year investigation potentially complicating her candidacy in the home stretch ahead of the 11th of April elections. Fujimori, daughter of jailed ex-president Alberto Fujimori, has long been under investigation for allegedly receiving $1.2 million from a Brazilian construction company, Odebrecht, during her first presidential bid in 2011. Fujimori's alleged crimes merited a jail sentence of 30 years. In Mexico, at least 11 people died on a highway in the northern part of the country after the bus they were traveling in flipped on its side. According to local reports, the bus was traveling in Salinas, Victoria, Nuevo León, when it got involved in an accident with a truck transporting diesel. The bus then lost control and flipped on its side. 7 other people suffered injuries and are receiving treatment in hospital. 11 people are missing and over 200 houses have been destroyed in the southern Argentine province of Chubut as forest fires destroyed over 2,000 hectares of woods in the Patagonian region. The fire also killed an unknown number of animals and destroyed vehicles and household items. Authorities are keeping an eye on multiple hotspots as they attempt to fully extinguish the fire despite problems with electric power supply and water. Argentina's Chubut province lies between the Andes Mountains and the Atlantic Ocean. World Today Desk, DD India.
Right, time now for your daily fix of offbeat, funny or unique news stories in our segment Beyond Headlines.
A new exhibition at the Museum of Modern Art in New York seeks to show the wide-ranging work of artist Alexander Calder, who most people associate only with his popular mobiles. The exhibition, titled Alexander Calder, Modern from the Start, draws on the rich and varied holdings the museum had with American artist. Born in Pennsylvania in 1898 and trained as an engineer, moved to Paris in the 1920s. He came under influence of avant-garde and abstract artists like Fernand Léger, John Miro, Marcel Duchamp, who coined the word mobiles to describe Calder's constructions. The curator of the exhibition, Cara Maines, simply puts it as a sculpture that moves. A video showing the viewpoint of a drone flying through popular Minnesota bowling alley has gone viral on the internet. The nearly minute-and-a-half-long video, titled Right Up Our Alley, filmed and produced at night on March 2nd, begins outside where the drone sweeps in from across the street and through the doors of Bryant Lake Bowl in Minneapolis. Video's director Anthony Jaska says there is some skepticism of it being true one take. It surely is true one take. There is no CGI. He says that it just takes to combine the skills of an amazing pilot, technology of a drone, and the story that can actually be told through one take. Ken, a fashion doll Barbie's long-term companion, turned 60 on Thursday, celebrating the milestone birthday with a return to his original look. The toy maker, Mattel, recreated a silkstone version of the first Ken doll, dressed in red swimming trunks, sandals, and carrying a yellow towel on his shoulders. Ken, named after the son of Mattel founders, Elliot and Ruth Handler, first met Barbie on the set of television commercial in 1961. Barbie's senior designer, Robert Best, says that today it's more about different hair textures and hairstyles, different skin colors, as well as representing Ken's different abilities. A digital artwork was sold for nearly $70 million at the Christie's on Thursday, in the first ever sale by a major auction house of a piece of art that does not exist in physical form. Every Days, the first 5,000 Days, is a digital work by American artist Mike Wilkman, known as Beeple. It is a collage of 5,000 individual images, which were made one per day over more than 13 years. The work is in the form of a new type of digital asset, a non-fungible token, meaning it is authenticated by blockchain that certifies its originality and ownership. On a fine day on March 3rd, a cat found itself amid a crisis in England. It used a ladder to rescue itself from a tree in the lanes of London. A video shared by London Fire Brigade shows the feline standing on a ladder pitched by the firefighters and placed next to a tree. The cat can be seen cautiously climbing down step by step, safely reaching the ground and running away. In a statement emailed by the London Fire Brigade, the poor cat had apparently been up for more than 48 hours but seemed fine when it came down, and astonishingly, it just ran off without so much as a thank you. In Ukraine, a couple found a permanent solution to their temporary fights: a handcuff. The couple grew tired of arguing, trying to mend their on-off relationship by handcuffing their hands together for 3 months and documenting their experiences on social media. Online car salesman Alexandra Kudley and beautician Victoria Pustevitova began what they call their experiment on Valentine's Day. For nearly a month, neither has had any personal space, and they are doing everything together, from grocery shopping to cooking. With a scattering of tiny shredded plastic bits across a refurbished canvas, Filipino artist Gilbert Angeles is transforming waste, especially non-recyclable trash, into paintings worth up a few $1,000s. Since 2019, 49-year-old artist has made over 24 such paintings, all of them made from mix of shredded plastic, expired paint and leftover wood from demolished homes. Angel said he started his advocacy hoping his talents can somehow influence people to rethink how they get rid of trash. His artworks have since been featured in upscale galleries. As a third-generation barber in Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh City, Lethim Kim Tram was determined to keep cutting hair despite a life-changing traffic accident 4 years ago that resulted in amputation of her left arm. After the accident, her husband left her with their 2 children, leaving feeling desperate. She says she was prepared to kill herself, but her kids stopped her. Drawing upon her family as a source of motivation, Tram returned to work as soon as she was discharged from the hospital. Now it's her 8-year-old son's dream to build her a robotic arm one day. Tram hopes she can help others who find themselves in similar situations. As waves were hitting the shore of Benin Beach, Gualam Legros, known as Sape, was spraying a giant painting of 2 giant interlaced hands on the local beach. Known for his monumental frescoes made with biodegradable paintings on lawns and beaches in different parts of the world, Sape arrived at Benin's village of Odea to finish the 10th step of the Beyond Walls project. The aim of the project, which started in 2019 at the Champs-Élysées in Paris, is to create a human chain of hands around the globe that will cross borders in order to carry out this universal message dedicated to friendship and togetherness. World Today Desk, DD India.
All right, let's now turn the pages of history and see what major events took place on this day. That's 12th March in Today in History.
It was on this day in 1862 when Jane A. Delano was born in Montour Falls in United States, New York. As an American nurse and educator, she founded the American Red Cross Nursing Service. She made possible the enlistment of more than 20,000 U.S. nurses for overseas duty during World War I. It was on March 12th in 1894 when Coca-Cola began selling the popular drink in glass bottles. Before that, Coke was only available as a fountain drink. Coca-Cola was invented by John Pemberton, a druggist in Columbus, Georgia, in 1886. It was on this day in 1930 when Mahatma Gandhi led a group of 80 people on a 24-day march against the British monopoly on production of salt beginning from Gujarat's Sabarmati Ashram. This non-violent protest came to be known as the Dandi March or Salt March. On this day in 1999, American-born violinist and music teacher Yehudi Menuhin died in Berlin. Menuhin, the world-famous violinist who dazzled audiences as a child, later became a statesman in promoting music as a path to international understanding. He died in Berlin hospital after a heart attack at the age of 82. It was in 2003 when Serbian Prime Minister Zoran Đinđić was assassinated in front of the main government building in Belgrade. The government of Serbia declared a state of emergency shortly after going into emergency session after the former Serbian Prime Minister's death was announced. World Today Desk, DD India.
Now, in the first ever Quad Summit, the leaders of India, the US, Japan and Australia will hold a video conference just moments from now. The summit will discuss regional and global issues and exchange views on peace and security in the Indo-Pacific region. But with the China factor still a huge concern, what's really going to be on the agenda when Prime Minister Modi meets US President Joe Biden, Prime Minister Scott Morrison of Australia and Prime Minister Suga Yoshihide of Japan? Take a look at the next report.
Keeping the China challenge squarely in their sights, the first summit meeting of the Quad, India, US, Japan and Australia will take place virtually on 12th March. Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be participating along with Prime Minister of Australia Scott Morrison and Prime Minister of Japan Yoshihide Suga and President of US Joseph R. Biden in the first Leader Summit of the Quadrilateral Framework. The leaders will discuss regional and global issues of shared interest and exchange views on practical areas of cooperation towards maintaining a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. The summit will provide an opportunity to exchange views on contemporary challenges such as resilient supply chains, emerging and critical technologies, maritime security and climate change. White House spokeswoman Jen Psaki said the meeting of the Quad countries indicates the importance Biden places in US allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific region.
On Friday morning, President Biden will meet virtually with his counterparts in the Quad, Prime Minister Suga of Japan, Prime Minister Modi of India, and Prime Minister Morrison of Australia, formed in the aftermath of the 2004 tsunami and formalized in 2007. The Quad has met regularly at the working and foreign minister level. However, Friday will be the first time that the Quad is meeting at the leader level. That President Biden has made this one of his earliest multilateral engagements speaks to the importance we place on close cooperation with our allies and partners in the Indo-Pacific. A range of issues, of course, will be discussed. We expect to be discussed, I should say, facing the global community, from the threat of COVID to economic cooperation and, of course, to the climate crisis.
The leaders will also discuss ongoing efforts to combat COVID-19 pandemic and explore opportunities for collaboration in ensuring safe, equitable and affordable vaccines in the Indo-Pacific region. Dr. S. Jaishankar, Minister of External Affairs, participated in the 3rd India-Australia-Japan-USA Quad ministerial meeting held on 18 February 2021 with his counterparts Foreign Minister Maurice Payne, Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi and Secretary of State Antony Blinken. The ministers highlighted their shared attributes as political democracies, market economies and pluralistic societies. They recognized that the changes underway in the world makes a strong case for the countries working closely together. It was important for the international community that the direction of changes remains positive and beneficial to all. Quadrilateral Security Dialogue is an informal strategic dialogue between India, USA, Japan and Australia with a shared objective to ensure and support a free, open and prosperous Indo-Pacific region. World Today Desk, TD India.
Right, and joining us for a second time on World Today is Ambassador Vishnu Prakash. Ambassador Prakash, first of all, thank you for staying on and thank you for your patience. Now, very quickly, just one question. I want to get your sense of what to expect from the first ever, the maiden Quad Leader Summit. Now, some would say that Joe Biden has actually hit the ground running because this is his first multilateral engagement, coming as it does in less than 2 months since his inauguration.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, it's much more than that. Experts mention that, say that rarely in the American history has any incoming administration been so prepared and so experienced. President Biden himself has 50 years of public engagements and exposure under his belt, and he has a very put together, very quickly and experienced team. So a lot of thought has gone into it, which is clearly evident. And at the moment, it would appear that the Quad process has been taken as the cornerstone of the American Indo-Pacific policy. So what we are going to witness today, as the Prime Minister of Australia said, is a historic moment. Very rarely has one seen such profound changes happening in the geopolitical, geostrategic sphere with such speed and with such sense of purpose. And once this framework is established, I think it will have a far-reaching impact, and we hope it will bring about deepen peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific region and beyond.
Indeed. On that note, Ambassador Prakash, may I thank you once again for making time for us here on World Today. Appreciate it. Right, and joining us now is my colleague Arun Sharma. Arun, welcome to World Today. Now, we are counting down to the much anticipated first ever maiden Quad Leaders Summit. What is one supposed to make of the significance of this? Help put it into context for our viewers, Arun.
Indeed, this quadrilateral meeting has much to offer on the table for all the Quad countries. Right. Now, you can understand the significance of this Quad meeting, specifically for the first time as well in this post-COVID world. Also, for the first time in this entire new decade, this top leadership is meeting for the first time. This also gives a significance, Ramesh, that after Biden administration, coming to power, one of the first primarily you consider multilateral meetings that he's chosen is Quad meeting, and the White House has also said that this shows that how the White House primarily, the US is primarily giving much emphasis on the quadrilateral grouping or the Quad meeting as well. The National Security Advisor of US has also mentioned this point, that the outcome of the Quad meeting, the highlights of the Quad meeting will also play a significant role as far as deciding policies as far as US is concerned. But let's try to understand from the India's perspective that what India is looking forward as far as Quad meeting is concerned. Number one is, of course, the Indo-Pacific. All the like-minded democracies, they have come together on this platform of quadrilateral meeting, and they all are for, for safe and secure, open, free and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. So that is what the common point. And what practical cooperation can be achieved as far as this grouping is concerned, as far as Indo-Pacific region is concerned. That is something to be looked forward to, because the Prime Minister Narendra Modi on various multilateral forum, various global forums has mentioned this point, that India is for a safe and secure Indo-Pacific, and it is for inclusive Indo-Pacific. So that is what India's stance is. And how can these like-minded democracies that we'll talk today, as far as Indo-Pacific is concerned, that is going to shape the future, because all the coordinated efforts are required. We have seen that the naval exercises, the quad naval, the combined or the joint naval exercises can also be a regular feature going forward. As far as the regular naval exercises are concerned, this is from the defense point of view. Now, this is as far as Indo-Pacific is concerned. Second, of course, as we know, this fact that the COVID, because the statement from the Prime Minister office clearly mentions this point that the COVID challenges and the COVID vaccination, this is very much likely to be highlighted as far as this meeting is concerned. That is something which will be topping the agenda, specifically the COVID vaccination. So how can there be global coordinated efforts as far as vaccination drive is concerned? How can more research and development can be done as far as vaccines are concerned? How can global collaborations can happen? How can equitable distribution can happen as far as vaccines are concerned? And how can primarily economic vaccine can reach the developing countries as well, the underdeveloped countries as well, and of course various other regions as well. So that is what these top groupings, primarily top leaders would be focusing upon. Third important aspect is, of course, technology and resilient infrastructure in this post-COVID world, because we know this for a fact, Ramesh, the Japanese, are way more superior as far as 5G technology is concerned. Australia, for that matter, when we're looking for electric vehicle fast charging technology, because India is gradually ramping up its capacities as far as EV charging stations are concerned. We're looking for technology that are related to fast charging stations, fast charging lithium-ion batteries. So how can Australia, Japan, these countries can come forward as far as the critical technologies are concerned? So electronic and electrical, these two components can also highlight as far as this meeting is concerned. As far as critical technology, that is what the Prime Minister and the PM office clearly mentioned this point, that critical technologies can be the focus area as well. And we should not forget this fact that the climate change can be very much on the agenda, because the way India is leading as far as climate change is concerned, and the Biden administration is also very much on forefront as far as climate action, the climate change, doing actions as far as controlling the climate change is concerned. So Biden administration is also on the forefront on that aspect. So how can this strong grouping can come forward and of course can take much more coordinated actions as far as climate change is concerned? That is also likely on the agenda, because India has taken a leadership role as far as giving as far as forming International Solar Alliance, or keeping an ambitious target of 400 gigawatts of renewable sources of energy, this target to be achieved by 2030. So all these ambitious targets have been achieved or primarily has been given by India. And these all things are likely to be, dominate the Quad meeting. But as I mentioned earlier, that apart from all these points, there are much more regional topics, multilateral, agenda that is also likely to highlight, be it Myanmar, be it Hong Kong, Taiwan. So all these issues are also very much likely to top the agenda as far as this coordinator meeting is concerned, Ramesh.
Indeed, Arun, and as my colleague Arun was pointing out, the Quad or the quadrilateral is a grouping of 4 countries: India, the US, Japan and Australia. And as he mentioned, they're all democracies and they stand for a free, open and inclusive Indo-Pacific. Now, talking in detail, Arun, about the issues that could come up in the maiden Quad Leaders Summit, you spoke about COVID-19 pandemic. In that context, from India's perspective, can we expect some concrete practical suggestions to, one, ensure affordable vaccines for many countries in the Indo-Pacific region, and 2, to also talk about resilient supply chains going forward as well?
Absolutely. So there are two important components to it. Number one, even during the COVID pandemic time, when COVID was hitting all the economies on this planet, at that time also India played a leading role. As far as supplying of hydroxychloroquine vaccine is concerned, the medicine is concerned, at that time also to more than 150 countries, primarily India supplied this hydroxychloroquine medicine and various other healthcare equipments during the COVID pandemic time. India's vaccine mastery, this effort is being much appreciated by various other leaders, World Health Organization as well, as to how India is playing a significant role as far as providing vaccines.
Right, Arun, hold your thoughts. Let's cut live to the first ever maiden Quad Leaders Summit.
purpose that all are concerned about. A free and open Indo-Pacific is essential to each of our futures, our countries. The United States is committed to working with you, our partners, and all our allies in the region to achieve stability. And this is a group of particularly important because it's dedicated to the practical solutions and concrete results. And my counterparts, if you'll forgive me, I'd like to give one example of why it matters. There are many examples. But yesterday, I signed into law the American Rescue Plan to get the American people through this pandemic and kickstart our economy and our economic recovery. It's a bill that will get meaningful help into the hands of people in our country who need it the most. Consequently, this week, the OECD revised up its expected rate of growth for the United States this year as a consequence of that legislation. In fact, it doubled it from 3.2% to 6.5%, the fastest rate in 1 year economic growth since 1984. And it's critical because the OECD also predicted that the United States economic growth, fueled by the ARP and increased vaccinations, will be a key driver in global growth this year, and our trade partners benefiting around the world as a consequence. But to get this right, we all have to focus on generating domestic demand and driving sustainable global growth. And we're launching an ambitious new joint partnership that is going to boost vaccine manufacturing and for the global benefit and strengthen vaccinations to benefit the entire Indo-Pacific. We're establishing a new mechanism to enhance our cooperation and raise our mutual ambitions as we address accelerating climate change. And we're renewing our commitment to ensure that our region is governed by international law, committed to upholding universal values and free from coercion. We've got a big agenda ahead of us, gentlemen, as you well know, but I'm optimistic about our prospects. The Quad is going to be a vital arena for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific, and I look forward to working closely with all of you in the coming years. And now, Prime Minister Modi, I'm kicking it over to you. And again, it's great to see you.
Your Excellencies, President Biden, Prime Minister Morrison, and Prime Minister Suga, it is good to be among the friends. I thank President Biden for this initiative. Excellencies, we are united by our democratic values and our commitment to a free, open, and inclusive Indo-Pacific. Our agenda today, covering areas like vaccines, climate change, and emerging technologies, make the Quad a force for global good. I see this positive vision as an extension of India's ancient philosophy of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, which regards the world as one family. We will work together closer than ever before for advancing our shared values and promoting a secure, stable, and prosperous Indo-Pacific. Today's summit meeting shows that Quad has come of age. It will now remain an important pillar of stability in the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Prime Minister Morrison.
President Biden for this wonderful initiative and bringing us together. And my fellow Prime Ministers, it's great to see you. Namaste. Good morning, konnichiwa, and from Australia, g'day. As we begin a new day here in Australia, it's not yet dawn, but we join together as Quad leaders of nations to welcome what I think will be a new dawn in the Indo-Pacific through our gathering. History teaches us that when nations engage together in a partnership of strategic trust, of common hope and shared values, much can be achieved. When the world emerged from the Great War and our last global pandemic a century ago, it soon found a Great Depression and another global conflict that unleashed a poverty and a devastation that was unthinkable. As we emerge from this global pandemic and the global recession, let us together create a different future. It is the Indo-Pacific that will now shape the destiny of our world in the 21st century. As four leaders of great liberal democracies in the Indo-Pacific, let our partnership be the enabler of peace, stability and prosperity, and to do so inclusively with the many nations of our region, to share in their vision as expressed through ASEAN for an open, inclusive and resilient Indo-Pacific, to respect and support their sovereignty, independence and security by upholding our values and supporting international law, and to address the many challenges we face from COVID to climate change. Know, friends, that Australia, while looking to our friends in all of these tasks, we never leave it to our friends. We'll do our share of the heavy lifting to lighten the burden for us all. I'm delighted to now hand over to my good friend Yoshi, Prime Minister Suga.
Mr. Modi and ScoMo, it is a great honor to realize the Japan, Australia, India, US Leaders Summit with all of you working together to realize a free and open Indo-Pacific. Starting with the response to the tsunami disaster that we just saw on the video, the Quad four countries transformed into a forum for diplomatic dialogue in 2007. Since then, after overcoming some difficult circumstances from around 2017, we gained fresh momentum. In October last year, we reached the stage of holding the foreign ministers meeting here in Tokyo. Less than half a year since then, we are now holding this first leaders summit. And I do feel emotional about the development. I thank Joe for your initiative. With the four countries working together, I wish to firmly advance our cooperation to realize a free and open Indo-Pacific and to make visible and tangible contribution to the peace, stability, and prosperity of the region, including overcoming COVID-19. Yesterday was the 10th anniversary of the Great East Japan earthquake. We received massive support from the US, Australia, and India in our response to the disaster. Joe visited the affected areas soon after the disaster, and I thank you once again. I look forward to a fruitful discussion today.
Right, you were listening to the live proceedings of the first ever, the maiden Quad Leaders Summit, in which Prime Minister Modi and his counterparts from Australia and Japan, as well as President Biden of the US, took part in the preliminary discussions there. And Prime Minister Modi said, if I can quote him here, he says, the Quad is a force for good and a force for global good at that. And he says, it's good to be among friends, among the President Biden, Prime Minister Morrison of Australia, and Prime Minister Suga of Japan as well. Right, with that, we come to the end of this special broadcast. But news continues here on DD India. You can catch all the latest updates on our social media, mobile, and digital platforms. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.